Good evening. I call this meeting to order at 7:00 p.m. We have all of us here present: Nick Poloni, myself, Dana Powers, Ted Gergen, Jack Nicolai, Steve Brown. None of us are absent. We have Dr. Valenza with us. We are proud to welcome Marquez Guzman. Nailed it. And others are remote, I'm
Yes.
assuming? Okay.
And they'll be joining us for their reports.
In person?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And then if there are any visitors, please be sure to sign in the LGI and stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will take a motion on the agenda.
A motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Super. Jack seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries. Glad we're all in person here. President's report. I wanted to give a huge shout out and thank you to everyone who was involved in today's activities. That's kind of just to kick this off, and I'll just have I'll have Dr. Valenza go through the more extreme and detailed thank you for today.
Well, I will tell you that when we woke up this morning, we thought it would be a fairly routine day, but we had a situation where there was a little bit of a smell of gas in the building. We initially checked it right away with a gas meter to make sure that it was not a danger to students, and it was not at that time. We started kind of trying to figure out where and it was coming from. One of our custodians went up on the roof to check to see and make sure it wasn't by one of the air handling units. When he got up on the roof, he found that there was a small leak, but because of the way air handling units are and because of snow on the roof, it was kind of covering it. And so as a result, some of the gas was getting pulled into the air handling unit. The smell of it was actually in a couple of unused classrooms, so it wasn't significant in any of our classrooms where we had students in. We contacted Salem Lakes Fire Rescue, we contacted We Energies and Kenosha County Sheriff's Department, and they felt that in an abundance of caution we should evacuate. There wasn't, this, immediate run for your life kind of thing, but it was like just to be on. Houseman Transport, they were here almost immediately. It's amazing how fast they had their drivers here. That gave us a place to have the kids kind of wait out for a while where they weren't in the cold. In looking at it, it was actually really nice. And then We Energies came in and they did a bunch of testing. They agreed where we had found the source. The gas was shut off by that time, and they felt, after checking multiple places in the building, they felt that the building was safe for students to return to. But just a huge shout out to Salem Lakes Fire Rescue, Kenosha County Sheriff's Department, Dousman Transport, and We Energies for really kind of helping us work through that. So
I have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned this is because of snow buildup?
No, so it was harder to see once you're up on the roof actually where it was. It was likely due to kind of that process of freezing and unfreezing and freezing and unfreezing, and then snow on the gas lines. But I don't know that we have a definitive at this point. Eckhart has been out and they're looking to do the repairs for us.
Hopefully it's a venting problem. We can make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yep.
Okay.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, great. Clerk's report. Steve, please.
I have no correspondence other than to mention election information. Candidates for the school board appearing on the ballot for the upcoming
spring election for April 6th are Nick Poloni, Jack Nikolai, and Ted Gergen in that order. And just a reminder to everyone to vote on April 6th of 2021.
Super.
Very good. Thank you.
On the consent agenda, we have the board treasurer.
Sure, let's take a look, and super excited that Marquez is able to join us tonight, and feel free to ask questions or help us along the way. I will present the treasurer's report dated January 2021. So the general fund cash account with an ending balance of $3,154,205.12. Credit card account with an ending balance of $5,329.95. EBC Flex and HRA cash account with an ending balance of $13,267.93. Capital Improvement Fund with an ending balance of $413,478.51. Petty cash account with an ending balance of $400. LGIP with an ending balance of $300,169.22 for a grand asset total for January 2021 of $3,886,850.63.
I move we accept the treasurer's report as written, as stated.
So moved.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries. I like the layout. I can already see that you did stuff. It's awesome.
All right, we could take a look here at payment of accounts payable bills dated 1/23/21 through February 19th of 21. And these checks include 69726 and 70024, which if you notice are actually credited from earlier statements, and 70024 is replaced with the current 69988. So I don't know if we could talk through what that is in a little bit, but it also includes checks 69974 through 70024 and 202000465 through 202000542. Questions?
Yeah, I have a question about
Yes.
Eckhart. And are they doing the scope of work throughout a certain period of time and then billing us all at the same time?
You're talking about how there's multiple invoices
I
there?
mean, we're talking a couple $10,000, or a couple, $20,000+.
So the one of them was the roofing unit that we actually did get the bid on the roof unit, if you recall. I think that was last month or the month before. Some of it has been that. And then I'm assuming that there are times where we have kind of ongoing maintenance issues that they do with us. But I don't know all of the specifics. If you want, I can get back to you on each of those.
Yeah, I only say that because I see 21 line items of different amounts.
Maybe is it normally lumped together?
Well, I have a feeling that perhaps they're kind of taking our entire scope of work or whatever the case might be, and then
Itemizing it.
and then once their business office gets to it and then bills us, and then we have to pay for it. I just
Yeah,
think
I think if you look, Nick, under in the by vendor,
yep.
it's all listed there what the actual scope of that work was.
I see that. Yeah,
Oh,
it's just
okay.
it's for purposes of monthly billing.
Sure.
I don't know if that if that affects our monthly statements and things of that nature. I rather it stands out for sure.
Because there are so many in a row.
Yeah, it kind of lends the idea that perhaps they're just kind of saving all the receipts and saying, hey, here you go.
All at one time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just curious to that, but
Questions?
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, I noticed that they're all on the same check number, so
right.
So I can look into it and see if it's a matter of them sending in all the invoices all at once at the end of the month, or are we holding them? And I have to wrap my head around that.
Oh, I don't think there's any malfeasance necessarily happening here. Just kind of curious to how that billing structure is. So
Questions? Okay, go
All right, I move to approve the payment of accounts payable bills from 1/23/21 through 2/19/21.
Do we do the total on this one, or is it just the check number?
Just a check number.
Okay, it's just different formats.
Yeah.
It's throwing me off. Okay, so moved.
Steve Brown, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries.
I don't have to say my name anymore because we're all here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Creature.
John, I could, but I don't need to.
So we have the minutes of the regular school board meeting from 1/26/2021 as printed and amended, and I did want to point out to board members who probably were not aware, this is the first month that we have not had 2 board meetings for a long period of time. During COVID, we had all of our emergency
Right.
meetings all the time, and so this was the first time we actually went a month without having another board meeting.
I'm okay with that. I motion to approve the minutes of the regular school board meeting dated 1/26/2021 as printed and or amended.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries. Public comments, did we receive any?
No, we did not.
No public comments. Okay, feel free to submit those to Diane going forward. Always happy to get those.
So we have action item for waste recycling removal bids. There were 3 bids, John's Disposal Service, GFL Environmental, and ASDA Enterprises. Steve Squires, who is our maintenance director, was not able to attend this evening, but he did recommend in writing going with John's Disposal. It's the lowest bid and has good references. So the recommendation would be, again, to accept the bid from, as you would recommend, for waste recycling removal as presented.
I motion to approve the waste recycling removal bid from John's Disposal Service for is it the upcoming year? Is it a yearly? For the upcoming year.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries.
So this one is a little more complicated. Steve did put out a RFP for lawn service bids. We do have 6 bids, as you can see. Hometown Lawn Care is our present lawn care company that we have our bid with. So you can see the different bids there. Superior Landscaping does have the lowest bid on that. However, Steve is suggesting that rather than bidding out our lawn service, we look into purchasing a commercial lawnmower and providing that in-house. We have summer staff and then we're able to supervise and determine the schedule for mowing ourselves. After 1 year, he feels we will have paid for the mower with ongoing costs of $300 weekly, which would be less than any of the bids that are out there. If we need to hire additionally, it may not even be that if we use our staff existing and we don't have to increase anybody's hours. In looking at the different bids for a mower, you can see they range from 19 down to 16. He's recommending that we get the Mid-State John Deere diesel lawnmower, mainly because obviously it's a quality mower, but in terms of any kind of service, they're right across the street. And any kind of
How
maintenance
convenient that is.
across the street.
Will they drop it off for us?
So Steve is recommending that we move from having a contractor do our lawn service to going in-house and purchasing a mower from Mid-State. One of the kind of challenges is we do need to find a place to keep it. We don't have a facility right now, but we did coincidentally buy those carports for COVID that we believe we won't have the need for this spring. And so we can enclose those fairly cheaply and then keep it there. So the recommendation would be to accept the bid from Mid-State to purchase a commercial mower and begin providing lawn services in-house.
Connie, a question about that. Would there be any need or any requirement for any additional insurance or any possibility of that with any of our staff who would be riding the mower just because of any potential hazards with regards to that?
So any of that comes under our umbrella. So for example, right now we have a kind of like a skid loader gator. We have a truck that we use to push snow and that type of thing. So it would fall under that same kind of umbrella liability policy.
Okay,
The only
very
thing the
good.
school
Thank you.
district will have to do is look at the district's policy for business personal property and make sure that's either increased or decreased pending on an audit. So Steve might want to take a kind of a role of what the district's, essentially if you took the building, flipped it on its head and shook it out, anything that would come out, that'd fall under that policy. So if we're adding another $20,000 essentially to it, that would just have to be updated. So speaking from that end.
As far as what? Can you be more specific what you were
Yeah,
saying?
you just let the current agent know that we're increasing values of the property that the school district owns.
Okay.
It's very cheap insurance.
Okay, thank you.
Bonnie, is Steve confident that it's just the mower and not because in the bids, they included things like trimmers and blowers and other equipment?
He feels that we have those. Again, if he had come to me and said, he's the one who came with the suggestion, feeling that we were capable of doing the work in-house. I think one of the issues was the scheduling, because when you work with a company, you're kind of at the mercy of their schedule. And so they may be scheduling every week. And then you get into that August lull, you may not need to have it done that particular week. And so he really felt that from the district perspective, it would give us more flexibility and save some money overall to go with the mower.
Are we held to the standard of doing the baseball or the softball diamonds too for grass cutting?
So we do that, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Right, and that would be part of that?
Yes, it's part of, so when he put the RFP out, all of the areas were
Okay.
there.
And then that has nothing to do with snow blowing?
No.
Right, okay. It's fun to ask.
And
Okay, thank you.
would this equipment come with any kind of a warranty or?
Yeah, and so of course there's the initial manufacturer's warranty on it because it would be brand new. But then also, part of the overall bid includes kind of a service contract for a while. And feeling like we would be able, obviously, to do the maintenance of the mower because it's cross street if we take the one on
I'm
this.
thinking more parts than anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
I motion to accept the bid from Midstate to purchase a commercial mower and begin providing lawn service in-house.
So,
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And motion carries. Exciting.
So you had asked as a board for us to revisit every month outside group access to our indoor facilities. As you can see, there's been a significant drop in the number of infections and how the Kenosha County views the risk of transmission being. That being said, obviously COVID has not gone away. And so we're certainly still dealing with some of those things. I just, what we're talking about are those requests from community groups and clubs, for example, Girl Scouts, youth basketball, etc. Just some considerations. We still have all of our in-facility groups and activities after school canceled, unless they're virtual type activities. By bringing in more activities, obviously, it opens up additional areas of the building to clean and monitor. But I think we're ready to at least make a proposal to start down that road. Westosha Middle School Conference has determined that there will not be conference-sponsored volleyball, but that districts may schedule between schools as desired. No decision has been made yet for softball or track. And then just a reminder that our staff will not be fully vaccinated, receiving both doses until the end of March or early April. So just overall, I spent a fair amount of time talking with Craig Ballou, who is our athletic director, about the feasibility of safely offering volleyball. We have boys and girls volleyball, and talked about what it would take to feel fairly comfortable making a proposal to the board to move forward with that. The idea of doing temperature checks before practice, grade level teams to reduce mixing of cohorts. And so what I mean by that is in the past, we'd have kind of an A-B team where you'd have some 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that would move up into that kind of A team. We feel at this point that would be really kind of messing with our cohort models to get those kids working together, and felt that it would be better for us right now to look at, for example, an 8th grade girls team, an 8th grade boys team, a 7th grade girls team, a 7th grade boys team for a start. Again, no spectators at home games, but streamed to any interested family members. We have the equipment to be able to do that. One of the things that also we would have a conversation with parents about and ask them to sign off is that there would not be carpooling home from practice, that it would be the type of thing where they would have to be transported separately. If we were to do, for example, travel to another team for a game, then we would look at social distance on the bus in order to do that. So it may well mean we end up getting additional buses to make that happen. There certainly will be probably a reduced number of games, but for the most part, most of the schools in Westosha Central, the conference, or in Westosha Conference, are interested in moving forward with volleyball in some capacity.
Connie, overall, without getting into any specifics, any personal comments and discussion between you and any outside groups, overall, how would you evaluate the discussions that you have had with any of the outside groups who have asked for the use of any of our facilities?
I think they've all been very understanding. I mean, the main ones that so far we've been saying no to has been like Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, again, because of that idea of mixing cohorts and within the school system, and also not necessarily having somebody around on staff at night to make sure that kids are maintaining social distance and that they're following through on mask wearing, for example, and those kind of things. I think where we felt like this was a good step in the right direction was that it's supervised by our staff, so we can kind of maintain that cohort-based model, maintain and continue to make sure that kids are doing the mask wearing. And volleyball is a little different. It's not a contact sport. So as we have other teams come in, for the most part, they're separated on the floor. The teams from outside, there's not that contact that you would have with basketball. We're also asking to open up a little bit for some of the community-based activities that support community health needs. So for example, the Blood Cross or the Red Cross has asked to do a blood drive here. We believe that we can do that safely. If there are other community-based kind of health-based initiatives that we can help support the community in, my recommendation would be we would try to do that. But those things tend to kind of be one-offs where we can kind of control a little bit more, both the entry into the building and how we maintain safety. And then my recommendation would be to again revisit some of the other things like, Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, at our next board meeting, once we evaluate kind of, is this downturn a blip and we're going to go back up again? Definitely people have expressed concerns about spring break and what that looks like, and will we see a surge after spring break? But for now, again, this would be my recommendation, would be to open district facilities for school-based volleyball and community-based activities that support community health needs, and then revisit for further opening at next month's board meeting.
One question. With volleyball, which is a low contact sport, there's still the ability to pass moisture on through the ball from one team to the other.
Yep.
Have they made provisions maybe for having a clean ball on the sidelines, so when play stops, you throw it in? Somebody's cleaning the equipment between plays?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to definitely look at what some of the different options are, and we're going to have great conversations with Central and see how they kind of handled that. Again, there have been virtually no cases of COVID spread by contact of items. So although it's not impossible that that would occur, Kenosha County is telling us that they're extremely, I mean, there just virtually are no cases that they can document that are due to contact with an item that somebody who had COVID had contact with.
I'm always going to err on the side of caution.
Yep. So,
Thank you.
okay.
I move we open district facilities for school-based volleyball and community-based activities to support community health needs, revised for further opening at next month's board meeting. For further opening at next month's board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, so I'm going to welcome John Gendron, District Administrator for Central High School District of Westosha, and he's going to talk a little bit about the referendum. We appreciate you coming today, and we also recognize that this referendum does impact the very same families that do come to Salem. So we appreciate you spending time with us this evening.
And thank you for having me. And I will, we had a community presentation, our second one last night, probably about 45 minutes. I'm going to try to do this in about 10 minutes for you, just because I want to be cognizant of your time. So as Connie said, we have been along the journey now for about 20 months looking at our facilities and making the determination to move forward with this. So is the first 3 or 4 slides, I'm going to they are extra important to, I think, what we do. It's just some of the achievements that we have. And I just want to, again, thank you. Last year I was here to tell you that your staff and your school community are doing an excellent job of preparing our kids. You know, transitions are hard, but our kids are doing really, really well. And although we sometimes get to see the credit of these next couple of slides, we certainly know that a lot of that work is due to what your teachers in your building have. So I won't read through all of these, but I think we're starting to see over the last 3 to 4 years some really strong trends in our student achievement. The next slide talks a little bit about something that we've really worked to do is how can we add programs to help kids? And I could list you 5 or 6 different things. This is the one that has probably come up most recently, is our adoption of Project Lead the Way. We will have next year, we will have 2 classes of biomed and 2 classes of engineering. We've already done some scheduling and we've already surpassed what we thought we were going to have for sections by 2 sections. So we're really excited about that. One of the questions I think community members should be asking anytime you talk about facility is, are you growing in enrollment? And as you know, this is an area that's growing. I think it's on the cusp to even continue to grow. But if you look at our current enrollment, we are up 60 students over the past 4 years. We know that as our seniors graduate and our incoming freshmen without any move-ins, just kids that are coming up from 8th grade, we will be plus 35 kids next year. So our enrollment is growing. We're getting very close to be 1,200 kids. We're at 1,147 right now. So we anticipate looking at the enrollment trends being at or around 1,200 students in the next 2 to 3 years. So this is just one of the things we'll talk about in a second is just adding some spaces. One of the things that we really struggle with is we want to add programs for kids because we know that kids that are involved beyond the day-to-day school tend to thrive, especially in the high school and as beyond. And one of the things that we have is such limited space to much less run our current programs, and I'll talk about that in a second. But as we want to try to expand some intramural activities, some new clubs and things of that sort, space really becomes a hindrance. And you know, we'll talk a little bit later about part of our plan to add a second gym. I'll just use the gym for an example. During the day, we have 4 PE teachers using 1 gym, and we do have a weight fitness area. So you can imagine with 900 students having multiple gyms here, the challenge that we face during the school day. But we even face it even more after school because, again, I'll start talking about sports. But in our girls and basketball seasons, our girls practice every night from 3 o'clock till 5:30. And then with COVID, we had the delay in between practices. We'd start boys practice at 6 o'clock and they'd go to 6 to 8, 6 to 8:30. So we had freshman boys that were living in Paris, living in Salem, wherever. They'd go home after school, get a little bite to eat. They're coming back at school at 6, not getting home until 8:45, 9 o'clock. So one of the solutions you'll see later is us adding a second gym. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. I think the next slide is probably out of everything. One of the things personally, I think on behalf of our board is we're most proud of is that third bullet. If you've been in the area, probably 3-4 years ago, the district was looking at some huge deficits, $500,000 deficits, wondering where they would be. And then at the end of the year, ended up with either a balanced budget or a surplus. So when I was hired 2 years ago, one of our charges was, how can we get our operational budget in line and accurate and things like that? So I think the second question we hope community members ask is, as we look at neighboring districts that are going out for operational referendums, the question should be is, well, we're going to build this facility, hopefully. Will you need to come back out in the fall for operational? And I can tell you, looking at our Baird model and our presentations, we have an operating budget that is balanced, guaranteed through the next 2 years. And you guys know, as school board members, you really work in 2-year cycles. And I'm not saying there's a cliff in year 3 and we're going to do that, but we're really focused on those 2 years. We've got a balanced budget built for the next 2 years, including some of the staffing needs that are associated with extra custodial services and things like that. So I think it's important for our community to understand that if the vote turns out to be yes, Central is not going to turn around next fall, next spring and say, boy, now we need $500,000 for an operational budget. I think enrollment and operational pieces are really important. So Connie, if you kind of just talk, I won't read through this, but this wasn't something that we just started 2 months ago. This process has really been going on for almost 2 years, looking at extensive facility study, then putting budgets together and such. So the facility study, the next slide kind of talks about, I skipped over this, I apologize, but we did do a community survey, put out our plan. We did have 64% of residents say that they would support that. And that was really a key piece for our board, because our board thought this makes sense to us. It's a sustainable plan. But our board wanted to make sure that they felt that they at least were moving in the right direction to take it to a referendum. And then that's where we kind of are at today. So the need really is focused on really 4 areas: enhancing safety and security, upgrading some building infrastructures, modernizing educational spaces, and expanding activities in performing arts. I think the one piece that I just will touch on in safety and security, because the map I'm going to show you doesn't really do that one justice. We have a building that has over 70 exterior doors to it. You can imagine in a high school, all the different doors into locker rooms, into the gym, and all of that. Our current security system is manual locks all over the building. So you can imagine, from the safety and security of a high school, of any school, if a student or someone that's there at night puts in a small pebble in a door and it looks like the door is closed, we would have no way of knowing if a door was ajar, open, and such. So part of this plan will enhance our security and safety by putting on, and I'm going to speak very quickly on this, but really an electronic monitoring system, so that if a door is ajar, it's unlocked, it's propped or anything, we can set it to 10 seconds, 15 seconds, wherever that is. And if that happens, our school resource officer, our assistant principals, the district administrator, whoever we set it to be would be notified, and we'd be able to get somebody to that door to see where that issue is. And I don't think it matters if it's a K-8 building or it's a 912 building. I think that security concern is huge, because unfortunately we live in a world right now where there have been some significant tragedies in school. So that won't show up in the map, but I did want everyone to understand the details of that. So Connie, if you go, I kind of touched on those. If you go to the next slide, one more, there we go. And I will kind of glance through this as quick and then take some questions for you. The solution of this project will be to repair parking lots in Falcon Way. If you go to our parking lots in the spring after a cold winter, we've got a lot of damaged hardscapes outside. We have really been, over the last probably 2 years, putting $8,000 to $10,000 a year into just repairs. And we have areas where that really need to be both either grinded down or resurfaced. So part of the solution is looking at the ideas of how do we have long-term solutions versus patches and repairs. Our second one is, if you've been to Central recently or at any point, you know that we have really 2 main entrances to our building. We have the main entrance, which really isn't an entrance during our day to our attendance office. With that, we also have 3 offices. We have an attendance office, a principal's office, and a district office. And the one thing that we know is we've got some opportunities to consolidate some services while creating one main entrance from a security standpoint. So you'll see number 2 there is where our district office is in our all-purpose area, kind of up in the top middle. That will be consolidated to our main office area. One of the needs we saw was our current cafeteria. We are serving 6 lunches. We start serving lunches at 10 o'clock in the morning. We serve all the way to 1. Our cafeteria really maxes out at about 250 to 300 students. So that's kind of the need why we have those. We probably could do 5 lunches if it wasn't COVID related, but the way the block schedules work and things like that, providing a larger commons area will allow us to kind of consolidate those lunch periods, give kids a little bit more opportunities and spread out a little bit. With that, number 4 is the new commons area. And if you kind of look between where 4 and 6 are, and if you look just to the left of number 4, where it says 3 there, that is our current cafeteria. So when we looked at our needs of our building, we looked at the needs of a 1,200 student school building and looked at how do we value all groups. And right now, we do not have an auditorium. Our cafeteria really doubles as our auditorium. So one of the needs that we talked about was not only adding another gym space, but also finding an auditorium. So the students that are involved in band and choir and drama and some of our speech classes and forensics have a place to share, show the skills and hard work they did. We've been really impressed with Bray Architects. So instead of building a new commons area, a new auditorium, and a new gym, we were able to the plan is to take our current cafeteria, convert that into an auditorium. The auditorium will be a roughly 600-seat auditorium, which for our student population, our size, and looking at what other high schools do, we feel that that is the right size. Some districts nearby us have auditoriums that seat 800 to 900 students or people. We don't feel that we need that. It also allows us to use our current space to make it an auditorium. Down at the bottom there, at number 6 would be where the second gym would be added. We've been asked this question quite a bit, and they've said, why don't you add more of a field house, instead of a second competition gym? And the answer was that was our original plan, to make it more of a field house, a multi-surface type atmosphere for kids. But if you look at our existing gym, which is right above section 8 there, if you've been in our gym recently, or maybe you didn't know this, our home side bleachers aren't able to be pulled out all the way. If you pull the bleachers all the way, they actually extend onto the courts. We also have bleachers that extend past the baselines of the basketball court. So anytime you go in and you touch anything, you do any kind of construction, you have to then make sure that it's handicap accessible. So we would have to take out the existing bleachers, and by putting bleachers in that would fit and also be handicap accessible, we'd lose seating for about 20 to 22% of our current seating. So as soon as we heard that, we said, boy, we're a growing school district. We need the capabilities to seat 1,500 to 2,000 people for different events, which kind of led us to that competition gym down there, number 8. One of the pieces that we really, really like is if you look at number 4, you can kind of see those dots right there. That then becomes our main entrance to all school activities. If you've come to a central event and you park where the cars are over there to the right, you've got to walk up and around to the front of the building. So what this will do is not only building a larger commons area, but that commons area connects to both gyms and the auditorium so that we can have spill out for activities, nighttime activities and such. Kind of if you go to the next page there, or the next slide, yep. And just a couple other highlights. I talked about number 6, adding the gym. The other advantage we had of where we placed the commons was we were able to take number 5, our kitchen area, and flip it. So instead of having to build a brand new kitchen, which obviously is real costly, we're able to use that space that we already have and just multi-purpose it to a kitchen and just add different doors to get in from a serving standpoint. Number 7 is also very important to know. If you kind of look down in the bottom left-hand area, that's our other additional area that we are proposing adding. That will have two different pieces. The first, where the 7 is, will be an area for an alternative education program and also an 18 to 21 special education program. Both of those services or opportunities for kids, we're currently outsourcing. So we would be able to bring those pieces back in-house. We're not doing it for money. But one of the byproducts is by bringing them back in-house, it will be a cost-saving measure. We feel it's far better for our students to be served in our building, to also integrate in with other students where applicable. So that's where number 7 is. And then there's also kind of just to the above that, there's 2 rooms you can't see, but those would be 2 new art rooms. And we added 2 new art rooms for 2 different reasons. Number 1 is, I think art looks much different today than it did in 1990. We're fortunate to have 2 really strong art teachers that use technology and integrate. But by bringing that up to our first floor, it's currently down in the basement, it kind of connects to the left there with our tech ed areas. So it really kind of starts to put all of, you hear STEAM and you add art into that. So it really starts to build those connections. And kind of, if you go to the last slide there, oh, one more, I'm sorry. If you go to the last slide there, down, you'll see in the top kind of left-hand picture there, where you see the 4 classrooms, those actually are 2 art rooms. So we kind of are able to achieve 2 different goals there. It allows us to take our current art rooms, modernize them, but then also turn them into 4 classrooms. So, and then last but not least, I didn't talk about the library, and I also didn't talk about every classroom, but every classroom in our building is being touched in one way or another. New lights, new flooring, new paint, new collaborative furniture. If you have been in our building, there are parts of our building that are very unchanged from where it was in the late 1990s. So that's kind of the snapshot of that. Let me kind of go over to the investment piece with you. So I think we know, as a board and as administration, we recognize that this is a large ask. We know that it's a large amount of money. And but I think one of the things we want people to understand is if you look at our current mill rate, our current mill rate is $3.07. And as you compare that to other high schools in our area, most of those high schools to the top, Waterford, Nicolay, Wilmont, Union Grove, have all passed facility referendums really within the last 5 years. Wilmot's a little bit longer. And then Lake Geneva is actually asking for both a facility and operational referendum this spring. So kind of if you go to the next slide is, so what does it mean? So $39.6 million, the mill rate impact for that is 59 cents. I have to tell you that one of those are using 3 to 3.25 interest rates. Interest rates are still lower than that, but obviously we want to project conservatively. We also are projecting a 4% equalized value growth. We've been averaging over 8% there. So I don't want to promise anyone, but I will promise this, that we are as confident can be that mill rate will not be greater than 59 cents. I think if interest rates stay below and we're able to borrow that in June, July, if our equalized value comes in at 6%, that mill rate implication will actually be less than that. But what we're communicating to folks is 59 cents. And you can see the impact on a $200,000 home. It's a 20-year borrow. Kind of if you go to that next slide, you'll sometimes hear districts say, well, this referendum will have no tax impact. And a lot of times that's for districts where debt is falling off. We don't have any debt falling off. So it will be an impact to our mill rate, and we want to be very transparent to that. But I will highlight to you that if you look at the mill rate at $3.66, that's near or equal to where we were in 2017-18. And I know people will say, but John, our home values have gone up, and that's 100% true. But we also are very fortunate to live and work in an area where not only is it property value going up, but there's added property value going in. So it's some assessed value increases, but some of it also is new property. So I think the last question, and I think it's the next slide that we've been asked at every presentation, is they say, why? Why now? We're in a global pandemic. Is this the right time? And all of that. And I think our answer to that is we truly believe that everything we presented to you tonight is our needs of our district. It's things that our community, our kids, our staff, I don't use the word deserve lightly, but I think would benefit from. So we believe that interest rates are at a historic low. We ran some calculations. A 0.25% interest rate increase is about $1.3 million in additional interest. So if we waited 2 years, kind of that fourth bullet says, we don't believe that the needs are going to go away. So us delaying this 2 years and such will only increase the cost of the project, both from construction costs and interest rates. So we took very highly the community response on the school perceptions. And we said going into it, our board said, if this comes back as a no, if they say, nope, we're not ready, the board was prepared to say, we'll stop it right now and we'll revisit it. But we had strong support. We've had strong support at our community meetings. We really believe that it's a plan that makes sense. Is it a large ask? Absolutely. I mean, I think anybody that says 39.6 million isn't a large ask, but we believe that we truly are touching every faction of our building, every group of students, from kids that are involved in sports, to drama band, to special needs, to some of our learning, and quite honestly, every classroom. I could tell you about all the technology upgrades in every classroom, all those different pieces, but it is an impact that we believe that every student will benefit from, and every student that's in your K-8 will benefit as they come through our building. So I went over my 10-minute allotment, and I tried to rush through that as best I could. What questions do you have that I can answer for you?
John, one of the things that several people have asked me when we got this in the mail, and a few people who had either been to the event or saw it, or watched it virtually, and I wrote the question down. The first was, and you sort of just alluded to it, what impact overall will this $39.6 million have on the academic achievement and growth for your students, for our students? And I'm asking that as well as an educator, as a parent, not a parent in the schools now, but as a parent.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's very tangible things that we can say is that we're going to have collaborative spaces. Our library is, if you walked in our library looks like it, was from the 1980s, right? I mean, library media has changed. We've got collaborative spaces, breakout rooms. We're going to update a few things in our science lab. So I think from an academic achievement place, it's going to do that. And I think the other piece of it is it's also going to add some life to the building. And I think those pieces, those are very hard to objectively say, well, adding light to a classroom or adding those things, what impact does that have? But I think all those little things will add up to a better learning environment. And then you talk about the added spaces of what an auditorium will do for our students, what a second gym will do for our students, not only from an athletic standpoint, but a PE standpoint, adding intramural programs and such like that. So I wouldn't say this if I didn't believe this. I believe that will enhance. And I think one of the other pieces that was said to us at a community meeting by one of our people, we all know that teachers it's a shortage. And this isn't why we're doing this, but we also know that this will attract some of the best teachers that want to come and work in our facility, which I then will have tremendous impact on what our student achievement is. So that's not why we're doing that, but I do think that's a byproduct of that, is because we are in a very competitive state for educators. And I don't mean state of Wisconsin, where it is. Sure. So if we can provide facilities for kids, but some of those other variables that will help us recruit, retain the best teachers and allow them to do their craft with technology and collaborative spaces. So probably a longer answer than you wanted, but something I do feel very passionate about.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How involved was the staff in the planning for these new facilities?
Well, so that's a great question. So our staff was surveyed, they had input on all of that. And then what will happen is, the other question that I didn't mention is, and I was a little bit naive to this, is that, is when's that first shovel going to hit the ground, right? But really that first shovel won't hit the ground till a year from now, by the time we do permits. And that's where our teachers, our staff will be involved in all the focus groups to say, like, look at that alt ed area, right? To be able to sit and say, okay, what is that exactly going to look like? What's that type of furniture in that? So conceptually, they were initially, when we put the survey out to our staff, we had 98% of our staff filled out the survey, and 98% said at the highest level that conceptual plan they supported. So I think they valued it. I think they were there in the needs of auditorium or gym or a new library space, but they'll be even more involved when we start to get into the actual design. Because right now it's still conceptual to go from there.
I'm comparing what you've got with what we had here when they redid the band room. What's down there is the fourth incarnation. There were ones where they wanted practice rooms with doors on both sides, which you wanted to just cut a hole in the wall.
Right.
And the band is going to bleed into the choir. And it turned out beautifully. And I know that when they rebuilt the music rooms at your school, the teachers didn't have much input. They put a double door right between the band and choir room, and there's no stopping that sound from going through.
Yeah.
So the teachers who are in situations like that are aware of the needs of specific environments can be a really positive force
Absolutely.
in making sure that things are done properly, things that maybe the architects hadn't considered.
Excellent point.
I just have to say, timing wise, if anyone's watching this, the interest rate situation right now you're talking about, we're not going to have lower interest rates than we have right now. And as soon as the pandemic comes under control, I think that's a very extremely valid point that needs to be recognized, is that you're saving tens and tens of thousands of dollars, maybe $100,000s of dollars by doing this project now comparatively down the road. So I think it was a smart idea, although it could seem misconstrued in the idea and timing, but truly smart on the district's thought process of doing it with the interest rates where they're at. So
You're great right now. You really are. So I appreciate your time. I mean, we'll have March 11th. We'll have the full one. You're certainly more than welcome to come to that. You'll hear that, but with just a little bit more details. But we're excited. We're excited for, honestly, the last thing I'll leave with you is we've got kind of our boards around our building. And one of the disheartening pieces is when a junior comes up and says, "Oh, this is so great. When's this going to be done?" And you say, when maybe younger brother or younger sister are there. So really the other piece of that is, I mean, the great benefit, and that's why I appreciate your time and being able to reach out to your parents, because the kids that are in 7th and 8th grade really are the ones that are going to fully benefit from the comprehensive high school. Not as much the kids that are currently in our school. So that's why I appreciate your time to be able to come and go from there. And I just want to say, I think our articulation vertically, COVID has slowed it a little bit this year, but I do think that we are working hard to be able to do some of those vertical articulations. Even though we're not one district, we can still learn a lot from each other. So I appreciate Connie and the expertise that she's brought to our building in terms of just some of that vertical piece. So I thank you for that too.
Sure, thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
That's great, thank you.
Connie, I'll just leave some extras here if anybody wants them. Okay, I'm gonna slide over there.
Okay, excellent.
I'm gonna slide over to this chair. I'm gonna stay and watch a little bit.
I was kidding.
Yeah, no.
You can. Sometime in early April, or after all this, and
Look forward to it.
we'll set something up. Good, thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, I just want to touch on some of the overall kind of basics of our audit. So we go through an annual audit each year, and as part of that process, there are some things that we've talked about year after year after year that we can't really fix all that well. There's some other areas that were pointed out to us that are areas in need of improvement for us, and I think although we anticipated I feel really good about the conversations we've been having, and I want to take this opportunity to introduce our new business administrator who's joining us for the first board meeting. We'll give him a chance to talk a little more personally and get him jumping right in here as we kind of go through this audit. But I feel very confident that some of the concerns that we as a district have had in the past are now well on the path to being addressed. We've had conversations about, are there ways that we could be more transparent? Are there ways that we could be more open? And are there ways that we could provide more information that's more useful to people? So just to go over a couple of the areas, and I'm going to have Marquez jump in if there's something I'm misstating. But one of the new findings this time was in terms of our material audit adjustments. During the course of the audit, the auditor proposed a number of adjusting journal entries that were required to prevent the financial statements from being materially misstated. We recommend that the management review the nature of these entries in order to determine if these adjustments could be made prior to the audit. So in other words, in looking at the different accounts, that some of those adjustments would be made before the auditor comes in terms of instead of having the auditor find and then have to go back and make those adjustments. And again, the key is to make sure that the information that's provided to the community is accurate in terms of what our budget looks like and what our expenditures are and what our revenues are. I just will remind everybody that this is related to 2019, 2020. So that would be the year that ended last July. So we're not talking about this year's budget. We're going back a ways before Marquez was here. So I'm not going to blame anything on Marquez, but he gets to fix it all for us. So we appreciate that. Did you want to add anything on that one?
Sure. So for those of you who I met shortly before the board meeting, thank you for having me here. I just wrapped up my 7th day in the district, so I'm still trying to wrap my head around things. But one of the first things I did, actually on the 2nd day that I was here, I got on the phone with our auditor, Phil Greening, over at Sitzberger, and I sat down and went through all 5 of these findings, and we kind of went through and addressed each one. And as we're going to go through on the next couple slides, there's a couple more, but this first one really is just kind of is related to just making sure all the kind of year-end journal entries are actually done. And based on my conversation with them, it seemed like there were some related to payroll accruals, prepaid accounts, just kind of standard year-end entries that weren't done by the time the auditors came. And so I'm confident that by the time I already scheduled our audit for this current year, the week of August 9th. So I'm confident that by that time I will have all of the entries will be done, hopefully before the end of July. So we have a couple weeks to relax before the auditors come. But this material weakness, finding number 1, I'm confident we will not have next year.
And then the next one is preparation of financial statements. This is one we've had for quite a few years, not untypical for districts our size. It basically means that we don't ultimately prepare our own financial statements. They're done by the auditor, and of course, obviously in an ideal situation, that would all be done in-house and you would have enough staff to go through and verify all of those different figures. But again, not untypical for districts our size, very likely to continue going forward. But just kind of giving you a heads up on that one. I would say if you went back 10 years, you'd probably find that.
Yep.
Hard to find it.
Unfortunately, yeah, this is one that will be unlikely to go away. I've actually only worked in one district where we didn't have this one, and that was MPS. We had a whole audit team that prepared financial statements, but I've never worked in a district that had its own team that prepared financial statements at the end of the year. So.
And then going on, again, another one that we've had for many years in very typical in districts our size, I actually, in a district I was in, tried really hard to get rid of that one. I had all different people involved and still couldn't get rid of it. So it's just, it is one of those things that really talks about the number of people that are involved in having separate people do different jobs within that, so that you can, catch if there's people looking over each other's shoulders to make sure all the things are done accurately and correctly. And we just don't have the staff to be able to do that.
Yep. And this is the other finding that I think my goal is to only have those two: the preparation of financial statements and the segregation of duties. Talked to Phil at Sitzberger, and unfortunately, with only having 3 of us in the business office, he said it's virtually impossible to kind of segregate everything, and you could think about trying to pass duties out to people outside of the business office, but then you're kind of extending some of those financial functions that maybe you don't want to have too many people involved with. So unfortunately, this is likely to be another, hopefully the only other finding that we will have at the end of this school year.
And then we have, it's not considered a deficiency, but they present it as an opportunity for strengthening internal control, and had to do with our budgetary procedures. It was noted during the course of the audit that the governmental fund type expenditure accounts had overdrawn their appropriations. And so under Wisconsin statute, no order may be issued in excess of the funds appropriated for the purpose of which the order is drawn, unless authorized by a resolution adopted by a vote of 2/3 of the governing body. So again, some issues around, I think part of it, what is very typical in districts, is you establish a budget, and then there are things that happen that result in one area needing to pull more. But those adjustments over the course of the year in the budget then address that. What had occurred in our district in the prior year was that some of those adjustments were not made until then the end of the year, where they needed to be made. So
in some of the previous districts I've worked in, we've been able to get around this this finding by presenting in June a list of all the budget amendments we've made, changes we've made to the budget throughout the year, and kind of getting that board approval before the auditors come. So I'm not sure the timing of all the reports and the things that you guys approve from a financial standpoint, but typically I've been in districts, we've done a budget amendment approval by the board in June that covers all the changes to the budget throughout the year.
And that would be pretty typical. That's what I would be used to doing as well.
I just have a quick question. As you, and this is it's a specific question, but I'll make it as general as I can. As you look at these discrepancies that you've already seen in the 7 days that you've been here, how do you approach them in terms of making the corrections, and yet knowing that there, individuals were involved in all this, and not making it personal in any way in your role now in your new position?
Yeah, I think it's kind of alluded to. This is all based on previous school year, and so I always kind of look at opportunities for learning rather than focusing on what what did we do wrong, or what reframing it and saying what can we do better. Mm-hmm. So I've already sat down with our 2 other employees in our business office, and we've kind of already addressed these, and I think we've already been kind of moving in the right direction, and I'm confident that we can continue moving in the right direction. And like I said, really kind of focusing on the continued growth and improvement, and really not blaming anybody, because
sure.
This is in the past, this has already happened. Can't change these audit findings, but you can prevent them from reoccurring in the future audits.
Of course. Okay, great. Thank you.
Do you have enough duct tape?
I gotta look into that.
And then the last one is just more of an awareness. It likely was in pretty much every school district audit across the state, my guess would be. And you would recall we did talk about some of the changes as it related to GASB 84, and how we're organizing certain accounts like our activity counts, for example, and that type of thing. So this one was not an actual audit finding, it was more of just a foreshadowing of what would be occurring.
And this one will not be an issue because we've inactivated all of our Fund 60 accounts. Really across the whole state, DPI made a big push moving Fund 60 accounts or things that were in Fund 60 and moving them into Fund 21 or Fund 10. So we've already done that, and we don't have any activity in Fund 60 anymore. So we will not have this awareness or finding on future audits.
Okay. So any questions about our audit?
Thank you.
Great work.
No, I'm excited because in my previous job, I actually handled our audit for the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm confident that I've been through it enough times that we can get through with only those 2 findings.
That's great.
Big job.
Good, thank you.
So it's that time of year to start talking about budget. I can't imagine a more complicated budget planning year than this year will be. But I thought we'd spend a little bit of time just talking about the governor's proposal for the budget. Obviously, this is just a proposal. It is not the past budget, but it's worth looking at because it's very likely the budget will not be passed until July. In some cases, that's even been later. We have to determine what our staffing is in this March-April window. And so, as you know, staffing is a significant portion of our budget, and we won't have clear information in terms of what the budget will be at that point. But the governor's proposal does restore the 2/3 funding commitment to public schools beginning in fiscal year 21-22. That was quite a while ago under Governor Thompson, I think, where the goal was to get to that 2/3 funding. This would restore that. It provides a general school aid increase of over $600 million over the biennium and more than $709 million for special education aid. This is a key, if it's passed, this is a key factor. Over the years, more and more money from the general budget has gone to provide support for our special education students. And the percentage that the state and the federal government has put into that, which are required, so state and federal requirements, has declined over the years. So that would be one of the other significant factors of the budget, because when a higher percentage of special education costs are covered by the state, that takes pressure off Fund 10, which is our fund for all of our students in the school, and which opens up some funding there for the district. It does increase per pupil aid over the biennium to fund per pupil payments of $750 each year for all students, and supplements those payments. And this is, I won't say it's a new proposal. It would be interesting to see how the assembly reads it, but an additional $75 per pupil for each economically disadvantaged resident pupil. So right now, as a district, about 36% of our students would fall in that category of economically disadvantaged. So it would send, if approved, would give a little additional money to districts for students who are economically disadvantaged. $75 obviously is not a hugely significant amount of money, but it is something additional. The budget does propose $54 million in funding for student mental health. You've heard a lot over COVID about concerns about that. Increases English language learners aid. It increases funding to sparsity aid. We are not a district that gets sparsity aid. This is more for some of your rural districts that are out there. I always say whenever you see an increase in an area for schools that don't mean you, that's an area to look to see if that, does that then have the opposite impact on school districts. So let's say, for example, the Assembly does choose that, but wants to keep the budget overall low, where would the impact of that be that could potentially hurt Salem, for example? It pauses growth in voucher programs. Again, we obviously in our district don't have any voucher schools, but there is money that comes from our tax assessment to cover, for example, the Milwaukee School Choice Program. And this is not a straight from the budget, but it could well have an impact on us as a district. It will require smaller employees to provide FMLA leave to their workforce, but extend that leave to care for a grandparent, grandchild, or sibling, and allow FMLA for medical quarantine, and lower the threshold of hours an employee has to work to qualify for FMLA leave. And this could have an impact on us as a district. I think that there's this perception sometimes that FMLA leave is leave that's paid for by a government entity somewhere, but it's not. When we approve FMLA leave for our employees, that is actually covered by the district, the cost of that. So when you increase the accessibility to FMLA leave, and I'm not making a judgment on whether that's a good thing or not, but it could extend some additional cost to us as a district. And then it does provide or proposes investment in broadband access, nearly $200 million over the biennium. This is key, obviously, as you think about families with access to internet. Certainly in less populated areas, the broadband is very important, but there's also $40 million in there towards helping low-income Wisconsinites afford internet services. And that was one of the things that when we were shut down this spring was a real hardship for some of our families that did not have access to internet. And we struggled to try and find ways for them to get that access. And then just a couple local factors. As you know, we'll likely need to address the 2021 staff increases due to COVID. So we did increase our staffing level to try and address some of the needs of COVID. That was never something that was intended to continue going forward. Obviously, our budget can't absorb that kind of an increase from year to year. So that will be something as we look to prepare next year's budget, how we're going to address some of those things. We experienced a significant reduction in student numbers, about 70 plus students this year. Very difficult to tell. Is that a trend? Is that because of COVID? Is, what exactly caused that? We know that some of that was fueled by a very large 8th grade class that left and was replaced by a much smaller 4K. So again, is that a one-year trend, or is that, something that will continue? So we'll have to keep our eye on that. I would say that to try and even predict numbers of 4K and 5K the students this year will be very difficult to do. We had many families that chose not to send their kids to 4K this year because of COVID. And so we may see an increase that we're not expecting, but that is also something we don't know what things will be like next fall. That is something that could continue as well. And then key for us as a district, you heard a conversation about an upcoming referendum at Central. 21-22 is the last year of the additional revenue that was approved from our operating referendum, and that will be key. One of the things I've asked Marquez, with the help of Baird, to look at is to really zero in on what the absolute minimum was that we need to operate as a district, to get a feel for, as we look forward to what we need for revenue, what do we need for operating, and then what, if anything, would go towards facilities, some sort of a facilities potential bonding issue spread out over multiple years. So those will all be key as we kind of go into this next year as well. So it'll be a very complicated year to budget for. Probably will not have the information we need to accurately budget till the budget is already significantly in place. But that's where we're at. So.
Yep, yeah, as Connie mentioned, it seems like there's a lot of unknowns, which is always typical at this time of year and this point in the budget. But likely with the help of Baird, who we purchased a budget model from, I subscribe to the School Administrators Alliance, which kind of gives you insight into potential things coming through the pipeline. And then through professional organizations like WASBO, the Wisconsin Association of School Business Officials. I'm pretty up to date on the most common estimates and things like that. I'm confident that we can work through it. And as we saw in the earlier presentation, that referendum planning is a long process. So we got to start looking at that timeline as well. By the time we get to the next board meeting, we'll have more information, and I will have wrapped my head around things a little bit better. But
Questions on our budget going forward?
That was great.
So administrator reports, I know that you wanted to just introduce yourself a little bit and then we'll call the other principals in.
all right. So I just have one slide. I just wanted to quickly cover a couple things. So I'll try to keep it 2 minutes or less. I just want to let you guys know that I'm very excited to be here. In preparation for the interview and going through the application process here, I watched a lot of board meetings to get a sense of the makeup of the board. I like the way you guys work together and collaborate with Connie. Connie was also another big reason why I took the job, or why I applied in the first place. I felt confident in her leadership and her experience, and she definitely seemed like she knew what she's talking about.
Pretends.
So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you. I just want to give you a little brief summary of my background and experience. I've spent my entire professional career in education. I started out as a special education high school teacher in Milwaukee Public Schools. And then I kind of transitioned into the business office function. First at Milwaukee Public Schools in their budget office. Then I was at Seton Catholic Schools, a network of Catholic schools in Milwaukee. And then most recently, I was in Greendale as their finance manager for the last 2.5 years. And I've worked with a lot of great business officials, and I've learned a lot from them, and feel confident that I have a professional network to reach out to when I do have questions or when I'm uncertain about things. I wanted to recognize both Kelsey and Jade in our business office for the tremendous work that they've done kind of in this transition period. They've really kept things going. And I think they deserve that recognition because it's not easy work, and I know they put in a lot of time and effort and long hours and things like that. So just wanted to recognize them. I also wanted to kind of emphasize my priorities in this role. Wanted to emphasize communication. I think that's very important. Communication with you, with the community, with staff, families. Collaboration. I think this upcoming budget, I'd like to make that a very collaborative process. You know, get feedback as much as we can, and really kind of make sure everybody's a part of it, and there's collaboration going on amongst everybody. And then transparency, making sure that I can answer your questions, and that you're aware of everything that's going on. And those are the 3 priorities I wanted to highlight. And then just wanted to mention, looking forward, I look forward to understanding the financials better, and by the next meeting I'll be better prepared to provide insights and additional information. So I think kept it close to 2 minutes.
So I will say it's been a joy to have Marquez on staff. He's fitting really well with our administrative leadership team. We had him out directing the buses this at noon and did an outstanding job, so I feel really good about that. So welcome.
Will you be mowing the lawn?
That's one of the few things I haven't done in a school.
You know, it's a
district.
possibility.
name on
We'll
the list.
see between his and my schedule in terms of who
I don't
can
know. If
handle
we
it.
get that lawn tractor, I might jump on.
Yeah, I want to ride.
I
Yeah.
could see you in
Forrest Gump it.
So I'm going to move on to Ryan. I'm hoping he's around here
Yeah.
somewhere. Yep.
He's been waiting in the wings.
Good evening.
Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the middle school climate survey. If you recall, the students took a survey in the end of January. I just want to kind of go over those results a little bit today. So participation rates, again, it was completely anonymous and it was completely independent. Students could make a decision if they actually wanted to participate or not. So in 6th grade, we had about 83% participate. 7th grade, we had 71%. 8th grade, we had around 76%. which made a total middle school, out of the total middle school students, that kind of came out to 78% of our students, or 239 students, which we thought was really well received.
Ryan, quick
Yeah.
question with those numbers. Does that include both like on-campus, virtual, and blended
so
students?
it does, yes. So when they did, the virtual teachers, when they did those meetings, they were given opportunities to take time and actually complete that survey as well.
Cool.
Yep. And then, so really what the survey questions did, and the whole purpose was it is we asked staff and we asked the community like what they see improvements we can make in the school, but we don't always ask students that. So we thought it was a really good idea to ask students those questions. So basically we asked students to select how much whether they agreed or disagreed with the statements listed below. And they either could strongly disagree, they could slightly disagree, they could slightly agree, and strongly agree. So the questions, there's 12 different questions we asked. Some were example for my school sets clear rules for behavior. I feel like I belong in this school. My teachers really care about me. I feel safe. I am treated with respect. So those are kind of the general overall questions we kind of asked throughout the survey. And so we also asked some demographic questions. Again, these were completely choice. And again, students didn't need to actually respond to these or not, but it was what their gender was, and what their race was, and what grade they were in. And some students who decide not to actually answer those questions, and that was entirely fine.
Now, one question I had
Yeah.
too about demographics of who was taking this. Are we including like cognitively disabled kids and?
Yeah, so we are. It was all middle school students had the option to take that, but when we're talking, it was done by gender and it was done by race.
Okay.
Yep, and grade level.
Okay. So then with said student base, did they have like teacher help and stuff like that, kind of understanding? What's
Yes,
going
they
on
did.
and
They had
everything?
teachers there that could
That's
help
fine.
answer those questions
Okay,
for them.
sure.
Yeah. And so here's kind of the overall results page. So just a couple highlights. I think the one that's really testament to our teachers is 89% either agreed in some way that the teachers really cared about them, which I thought was fantastic. Again, that's a testament to the teachers and how the work they do. 88% felt like the school sets clear expectations for behavior. And also 85 felt like the school was welcoming to people like me. And that's kind of how those questions were actually asked. Another portion is a lot of students also too, around 84% felt the school was very safe to attend. Some of the ones that we have some work on, obviously, like any survey, there were two that were kind of scored a little different. So 71% felt students treated each other with respect. And then 65% of students felt that they were able to work out disagreements with other students. And so that's kind of the overall picture. If you go to the next slide, this is kind of how we broke down every individual question. So there's an overall question, and then there's the gender differences, and then there's the ethnicity differences and how that was broken down. It's kind of important to note that some of those, in case for like black and brown, there was only 10 people who replied in that way, so that's not necessarily statistically relevant, but again, it's important that we obviously looked at that as well. And then so kind of our next step for this is a survey is actually going to go out to middle school students again if they want to be a part of focus groups moving forward. And really that focus groups are really going to just be to help us get a better idea why they answered the questions the way they did. So what made the school feel welcoming? What made the school safe? What were some things we could actually work on and improve on our school? And again, that will be something students will have the option to do. We're going to do that during lunch breaks in the upcoming weeks. And then another short-term thing we're going to do right away. So Judy Richter, our school counselor, is going to start doing some work with students on strategies that they can help work out disagreements with their peers. Because that was one of the things, like I said, they scored around 65%. They felt like they could work those disagreements out with each other, which is obviously extremely important. I want to also thank Erin Lockhoff. She's our social worker. She spent a lot of time putting this together, so she needs to be recognized for all this great work. All the questions, you have the full survey obviously right there where you can go through every individual question as well.
So I think really, in my mind, a real testament to the work our staff did to bring students back into the building, to give families options for students, whether they were virtual or whether they were blended or whether they were here. The fact that in the middle of this COVID pandemic, the large percentage of students who felt that they were cared about by their teachers and that they were welcomed by their schools is really a testament to the work our staff has done with kids this year.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Looking through all the pages, sort of scanning them, the third section of gender differences, the other section, I need a little more explanation.
So students could choose whether they wanted to identify as male or female, or there was an other option. And so in that case, we had 11 students that identified as other.
And I see a deficiency in the scores there.
Yeah, and so that's a good point. There again, there's 11 students that did say that, and that was for this question. They felt behavior in this case, based on this question, there was some differences compared to other genders. And things like
Visually,
that.
it looked like it was in just about every one of those graphs. That section had a lower score on it. And does that point to some deficiency that we need to look at?
I think as we want to obviously win those social groups, I think we want to have students come in to talk about those things, and that's what we're hoping to find out with those focus groups, absolutely. And how we can help all students, obviously, in the school.
All right, thank you.
Ryan, I think it's interesting when you look at that whole idea of belonging. I know this is something that we wrestle with all the time too, because in some regards, students are thought like, well, I shouldn't belong. Like if I belong, then I'm in this like weird, I want to be an outlier. So it's an interesting question. And also, I don't know, have you guys looked at using like Panorama at all? I don't know if Connie, looked at that as like a way to nationally norm and reference this data against,
I personally have. I know the student services team was looking into different areas with that, though.
Yeah, I think this is awesome baseline information. So and bringing kids in as a focus group is.
Like I said, I think, a testament a lot goes to the student service team with that. But we just felt it was really important that students had a say in what things look like in middle school and how students are really feeling. Because we don't always know, because they're middle schoolers, and middle schoolers don't always tell us with one-on-one. So
This is great.
Great stuff.
thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Ryan. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
You missed a spot.
Hi, Patty.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
All right, my report is very short. So, just like with everything else we've been talking about tonight, we are in full mode, planning mode for fall. So we have our developmental screening scheduled for children in our community who are currently 2 years and 9 months to 5 years old who haven't enrolled in school yet. So that screening will be taking place on March 10th. And then we have opened up 4K and 5K enrollment, and that's running until March 5th. We're hoping to see a nice increase in the number of students who are coming into 4K and 5K for next year. We are meeting as grade level teams right now, looking at essential standards for students, making sure we identify what the most important things are for students to learn, making sure that every student who exits a grade level meets those standards. So we're working on identifying what those are. And then our first grade through fifth grade just finished MAP testing. We're wrapping up those makeup tests this week, and family reports will be coming out soon. And then we'll be able to see, we'll have one measure at least of how our students have grown since the beginning of this year. That's the first piece of data we'll really have that will show growth since students returned to school, since they left in last March, a year ago.
Are you anticipating, just because of the whole COVID-19 pandemic from last March until now, let me rephrase my question. What are you and the teachers anticipating with regards to test scores?
I anticipate that they're going to show that lack. When students returned in the fall, they returned after a 6-month absence. And so we're going to see that in the scores, especially if
An absence as in a drop in scores?
We'll see a decrease,
Okay.
yes. I do think that once we account for, once school started again, when we look at growth from fall to winter, we'll see that growth. But year over year, I think it won't be what we are used to seeing.
Right, and you see that longitudinally lasting over a period of time?
It will take some time to overcome, but I think that's a nationwide problem.
Sure, of course.
And considering the supports that we've had in place here in Salem and the different modalities for learning for students, I think we're going to be in a better position than a lot of places.
Good.
So Patty, with
Okay, thank you.
younger students obviously being more impacted by the situation with COVID in the last year and a half, you know, my son included, you know, we can definitely see a difference from my oldest son to my younger son based on the learning capabilities. I'm assuming after this, and when you get that data, you know, there's gonna be a lot of talk about how we're gonna kind of flatten that curve a little bit from this, I'm gonna assume.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Yes.
some of those discussions are already in process and talked about based upon the data that comes
Yes.
back. Okay.
And that's going to tie into our conversations at grade levels for those essential standards.
Okay.
So we already have some data based on our new reading series with that. With the reading assessments that we do. Sure. So we have, we'll have a couple of pieces of information to look at there and decide what do we really need to focus on? What do kids need the most? What are those foundational things that we need to make sure that they're getting, especially in the younger grades, building that foundation moving forward.
Sure.
It'll be interesting to see what equity gaps might exist.
Yes.
Like Connie was talking about access to internet and technologies and how that has maybe caused some divide in that map testing and those standards.
I think it's been pretty clear at the state and national level that the COVID pandemic did not help the achievement gap any. I mean, in most cases, we will see that gap is likely widened, even with our situation where we have kids back in. That certainly did not help us close that gap. So
Right,
we'll
and then
have
how
to
long-term
attend to
that might end up being. I mean, depending on students and parts of the country and, you know, all the other factors, certainly.
I think we're going to have to do some re-examining of what it means to be on grade level.
Yeah.
What's that even going to mean moving forward?
Absolutely.
Sure.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, thank you, Patty. John, thank you. Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Hi, Judy.
Hey there. Just so you all know, I already have my resume on Connie's desk for the lawn mowing position, so
All right,
back off, the
all right.
position is.
That was the first question we were going to ask, you know that.
I had
Rock,
the
scissors.
advantage. I also want to put, or say a big thank you to the student services team, Aaron Lockoff, Judy Richter, and Anna Nacker, who did put together that entire climate survey. They are using Panorama quite a bit with a lot of their survey questions. We're relying on their data heavily because they've already done the work, so why not take advantage of that? But this is the first time that we're really starting to gather the data so we can start to really inform our social emotional learning and move forward on that path. So I want to, again, say thank you to them. And then just to update you, we continue to work on the inclusive communities. Our work continues to really focus on our own identities and beliefs, and more specifically then what experience have we all had that's really shaped our identities and what we believe and how we teach, how we instruct children. So the process continues that we do these activities together as a district leadership team. Then Patty and Ryan lead that work with the school leadership team, and then the school leadership team puts that, brings that work to the entire school community. So it's a process. We're still at the stage where we're really doing a lot of discovery, a lot of in-depth work before we start to really change any sort of our practices. So that work continues. And then I'll just go back and touch on the Red Cross blood drive that Connie had mentioned before. It is going to be on May 5th. Again, another huge shout out to Nicole Paul. She really did a lot of the legwork in getting the word out and getting some interest surveys done for us. Red Cross likes to start blood drives when there's an interest of about 30 people, and we had over 80 people respond just to an interest survey saying, would you be interested in donating a pint of blood? So we expect a really good turnout for that. This year, in COVID, we're not going to involve the students as much, but eventually we'd like to turn this into a service learning project for our upper grades, 6 through 8, where they're the ones really doing the marketing, they're doing the hosting, they're running the entire blood drive themselves. Maybe turn it into some sort of competition as far as which homeroom or grade level can bring in the most donors for it. And then in turn, those 8th graders can also go down and start providing some education to our younger students about blood and why it's so important to us. So I think it's going to be a great addition to our school community. That's all I have for you tonight.
Hey, Judy, real quick, you're like, so student services, so they go from the nurse's office and everything like that, right? So just a quick thing on the nurse's office, because I had to actually go through it. I know we set some with our kids, with stuffy nose or a cough or whatever the case is. I just want to say personally that I'm really impressed with the staff in that office. We've had a few incidents. They've been okay, but I can imagine the stress level that they're under, having to call parents and being a board member and having to talk to the nurse and knowing what our policy is. It was still slightly aggravating as a parent, but I understood because it's our policy. So I can imagine some of the parents that they have to speak to and that stress level that they go through. So I just want to personally throw, they're doing a fine job in there. I can only imagine how stressful that can be considering. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I think they're doing a fine. I've spoken with both of them. There's 2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're doing a fine job in there, just so you know.
They've done a marvelous job keeping us safe and doing a lot of parent education, because it's not just the parents calling in saying my child is ill, but anytime there's anyone ill on the list, they're calling, saying what's going on, what can we do, what can we help, and parents like, I just don't know what to do or where to go.
Yep.
They're helping those parents find resources. So yes, they've done a great job. So thank you.
Kudos to them. So
great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
So at this point, because I wanted you to have a month off, we don't have any committee reports, but that will not continue. I'd like to minimally schedule 2 different committee meetings, one being an education review. I'd like us to have a conversation around full day 4K. We're not, for sure there yet, but certainly having some strong conversations about the potential for that. And as part of that, would like to bring the committee together, the Education Review Committee. And then the other one I would like us to do would be finance, obviously working with Marquez to start really shaping both the process, how we get input into our budget process, how we share information with the staff related to our budgeting process. So I will send out to the members that are of those committee to pull together some dates within the next couple weeks. Cool. Yeah. Great. Board meeting, remember we have a little bit of a change in our board meeting schedule because of spring break. So the next regular school board meeting will be 7 p.m. Tuesday, March 16th, 2021.
Super. Anything else? Questions, comments? Awesome. I move to adjourn this meeting at 8:37.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And we are adjourned.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.